Washington's offense, very impressive, but their defense leaves a little to be desired. Are there some favorable matchups that Utah is going to be able to exploit against the Washington Huskies as they try to earn the upset against the top 5 team? We're talking about it on today's Locked On.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, thank you for joining us. We love interacting with you guys in the comments, so make sure you like and subscribe. You can also follow our show at Locked On Utes on social media at Twitter. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. And on today's show, we're really going to be diving into Washington's defense, see where the matchups favor Utah. I want to talk about the new CFP rankings as well, because I felt like you know, when you beat a team 55-3, I thought Utah might get to move up a little bit, especially when the teams ahead of them lost. So we'll discuss that, and at the very end, wrapping up with the Utah men's basketball team, who did earn a win on Monday night. But first, I want to start talking about this Washington defense. Their Washington offensively, Kalen DeBoer, comes from is more of an offensive-minded coach. O'Dunes, obviously Michael Penix, even that offensive line, Kyle Whittingham was giving them compliments. They're really good. One of the best offenses in college football, and the main reason the team is ranked in the top 5, just outside the top 4 where they want to be, but everything's still on the table and in front of them. And no matter what, Ohio State, Michigan, they're going to play each other no matter what happens in that loss and everything. Like, if Washington just wins out and takes care of business, they will be a college football playoff team. They absolutely need this game against Utah, and they've played down to their competition in the past. I don't expect them to do that to the back-to-back Pac-12 champs. I just think there's too much respect for Kyle Whittingham and the veterans this team has, especially defensively. I mean, that's where I'm really excited about this game, right? We're seeing best on best is the Utah defense versus the Washington offense. But that's what we'll be mainly maybe focused on. The other side of the ball is obviously going to play a huge role, especially if Utah hopes to get a win. And this is a Washington defense that has struggled at times this season. Early on that game against Boise State, it was close a little early. And yes, they took care of business against Tulsa, Michigan State. But look at Cal. They let Cal score 32. They did beat Arizona, and Arizona holding them to 24 now looks okay. But that was before the Fifita era kind of began there. Barely squeaked out that win against Oregon at home, and give them credit. Oregon is a really good team. I mean, Oregon is, like I said, I think Oregon's actually better than Washington. So props to them for finding a way to win. But then, Arizona, and I'll give them credit, like an Arizona State game, right? The offense struggled. The defense won them that game. But then you look, they let Stanford score 33. Look, USC's offense is very good, but they did let them score 42 points. So that's where you're like, okay, how does this defense is okay. And if you look at the Pac-12 defensive statistics, that's what they kind of support. They rank right in the middle of the conference in yards per game, allowing over 400 yards per game. They allow over 260 yards through the air and over 143 yards on the ground. And I do think there's there's opportunities for Utah to exploit here. We talk about a lot how Utah doesn't want to get in third and long situations. This is a game even more so, because this is one of the better pass rushing tandems in the Pac-12. I think overall, I still like Utah's pass rush the best, but when you're talking about the defensive ends they have, that's 2 elite guys who can get after the quarterback that I think could pose some problems. Obviously, Braylon Trice was the big name we knew coming into the year, but now you get a guy in Zion who's really starting to emerge for them. He had 3.5 sacks, one of those being a strip sack against USC last week. So those third and long situations, especially, this will be, Dorless was pretty good for Oregon, but I think this will be the toughest test yet for Spencer Fano or Tongai, whoever we see more at left tackle. It should be Fano. We only see Tongai a little bit, but that's going to be a tough test for them battling with Trice. And I do expect Utah to help him out with a tight end chipping, running backs being ready over there, even a receiver maybe bumping him quick before kind of trying to get out of his route. So there's lots of things Utah can do to alleviate that, but Utah should not want to be in third and long and let those pass rushers get to work. There's also a little bit of an interior rush there in general. I think Washington's defensive line is pretty good. If I had to say, I might say it's the strength of the team overall. I think they got some good size in the interior. We just talked about the pass rushers, guys who are very capable of being elite run defenders too, can set the edge. So good defensive line here. I remember a couple times that they, against a less athletic quarterback, which Bryson is, and Bryson can scramble a little bit, but the Washington defense would have had more sacks against Caleb Williams if he wasn't Caleb Williams and capable of making those crazy escape the pocket like plays. Bryson, we know he can't do that, unfortunately. So that's where it could be interesting to see if Utah is in those third longs. And we know that Utah has struggled with blitzes up the middle and kind of picking up twists too. That's something they're going to have to do well against the Huskies, or else it's going to be a lot of roaring for the crowd in Huskies Stadium. That's where I'm very curious to see what Utah's plan is to try to prevent those third and longs, or if they are, and how many they'll leave to protect. I would imagine a lot of 6-man protections, but I think we could see a lot of 7-man protections, even as I mentioned, that tight end kind of trying to chip before he goes out. And Utah running backs outside of Sione Vaki haven't really been a big part of the passing game at all this season. Jalen Glover made a nice grab along to move the chains a couple weeks ago against Oregon, actually one time. But overall, like I said, not really part of the passing game a ton. So expect them to stay in and help block. I do think there are some. Or look, this is a solid Washington defense, right? Like I said, statistically they're okay, but they do have some playmakers. I think in the secondary, there's a couple guys there I like. Their linebackers are solid, not outstanding, but there are going to be opportunities for Utah to win matchups. I think Devon Bailey is going to be able to get open. I want to see more opportunities from Munir McClain after his big play made last week. He's been that one was like a Moss 50-50 ball he's able to win, but we know with his speed in general, he was the one who converted that first down for Utah against Oregon too. I think this could be a big Munir McClain game. That'll be a name that I'll probably reference again during the prediction show that I'm going to be doing, but I'm definitely curious to see what kind of night Munir McClain has, because I think it could be a very good one for Utah, him and Vele. Would love to see Money Parks break loose for a big catch. We know when Utah won a big game last year against USC, both big games against USC, it was Money Parks who made some huge plays, and I think they could really use him again in this matchup, because you are going against a tough Washington team that, yes, as I said, their defense is middle of the Pac-12 pack, but they have some players capable of stepping up, making plays, particularly along the defensive line. But there's even a couple guys in the back end who are capable of taking passes away. I mean, this is a Huskies team that on the season, they do have 9 interceptions. They've batted 39 passes overall. Also, don't force a ton of fumbles, just 2 forced fumbles. But yeah, they got some guys capable of making those plays, as I mentioned. And Utah offensively, we know what it's been a struggle at times. So we'll see how Bryson performs and operates in this tough road environment. He was very good against USC in the last big road test, or just the last road game in general that Utah had. And this is going to be a very tough game too, because also Utah, just matchup wise, I'm not taking anything away from Bryson. Bryson was exceptional against USC, but the Washington defense is better than the USC defense. We know that. So that's why I'm just curious to see. And if you look back at the Rose Bowl, really struggled with that good Penn State pass rush. So can Utah protect Bryson? Because if you do not protect Bryson, Utah is going to lose this game, because Bryson will probably have 2 interceptions, and one of those could very well likely be a pick 6, which this Washington team has done that this season. So I think it's very interesting. I want to continue to kind of talk about, like, what if I think Bryson will have a big game. We talked about the receivers a little bit potentially, and how I would love to see Utah get them utilizing the game to try to beat this Washington defense. I want to dive into that a little bit more in a moment. But first, I want to talk to you guys about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, in our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros, sharks, and more, you pick more than or less than 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch those winnings roll in. And look, it's great with football obviously getting underway, but with basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball for the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you can do LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made and receptions. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks favorites like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz? You can find the new community plays under the promos tabs to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks communities. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, you can go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit. Prize Picks, the daily fantasy sports app made easy. I also want to talk to you guys about another sponsor on today's episode of Locked On Utes, and it's our great friends at UCCU. Learn and Earn, part of UCCU's mobile banking app, and they pay your entire family to learn about money. Kids, they look to parents to become more financially literate, but parents, they don't always know the answers. That's where Learn and Earn comes in, because Learn and Earn breaks down financial topics into fun, bite-sized educational games like quizzes and trivia. Every time a family member completes a topic, they earn points that can occur and can be redeemed for gift cards to stores like Amazon, Apple, Sephora, Walmart, Nike, and more. There's age-appropriate content for every member of the family who can compete against each other and track their progress on leaderboards. Learn and Earn is inside the UCCU mobile banking app, so you can play it anytime, anywhere. The more you play, the more you learn. And the more you learn, the more you earn. Learn and Earn, part of UCCU's award-winning Be Money Smart Youth Banking Program, helping kids, teens, and parents have fun while becoming more financially literate together. UCCU, love where you bank. All right, let's talk a little bit more about Bryson Barnes, because Bryson in the past had not looked as strong on the road. It's the reason he got benched, right? If you look back on that Baylor game, he really struggled there, but really stepped up for Utah against USC, was really smart with the ball, made good decisions, made tough throws on the move. One time found Landon King. Every game Bryson does that. Bryson has 2 to 3 really good throws where you're like, wow, that is a start. That is an elite starting Pac-12 quarterback caliber throw. And yes, I understand the statement I just made, but like I said, if you could probably say that about more quarterbacks that you guys take. Like if you look at their 3 best throws they make in a game, the biggest thing to success not even sports, anything in life, right? Is consistency. I mean, if you can make a great singular play, but like, can you continue to thread the needle, fit the ball in that tight window? That's something that Bryson isn't always able to, see the field, make the right reads. And I think he's been playing well overall. And yes, the Oregon game didn't go Utah's way. Keyword Utah's way, not Bryson's way. That's why I call Bryson a game manager, but I never really blame any of the games that Utah loses or has struggled like solely on. That's on Bryson right there. It's always a combination, right? It's never the offensive line or the running game where the receivers weren't creating as much separation, I thought, this week, or the tight ends. Like we are very cognizant of all the players who deserve blame basically. And each week it's never like, oh, it's not just on the quarterback. Like, that's a big thing. They do push, and it's certain media things like I'm not trying to shake a shot at anyone. I'm just saying we do see the headlines of like, oh, did this quarterback fold under pressure like that? And it's a team game. Like, there more times than not, it's the team. It's very rare that, oh, they lost the game solely because of the quarterback not playing well. And it's the same thing for Utah too. So yeah, this is, like we said in the last segment, this is going to be tough because the pass rush is pretty potent for Washington. But I do think Utah's offensive line has been playing better recently. Yes, against Oregon, it wasn't great, but this is a game where I think they have an opportunity to get right on the road, and they looked really good executing wise against Arizona State. It's probably the best game they played all season, and that was not a terrible defensive line either. I thought that, as I said going into that game, I thought the Arizona State front seven actually made some plays. I thought it was more so a credit for the Utah defensive line, just how they made them look overall too. So that's where you got to give a lot of credit to the way Jim Harding has his group bought in and playing right now. Utah's done a good job of protecting Bryson on the season. Bryson's done a good job getting rid of the ball for the most part. Every single game he'll take a bad sack or two, but overall it's not like it's a constant theme. And he's a smart runner too. That's something we know the Huskies will be keyed in on as well. So I am excited to see what Bryson can do. I do think he's capable of having a big game on the road. I expect the Utah offense to score over 20 points in this game. Will they get over 30? Right now I'm not feeling that. That's where it'll be interesting to see if Utah can hold Washington under 30, because that has, I believe, not happened this season. But if it has, it's been outside of the Arizona State. But that was such a fluky game. I mean, we mentioned that yesterday. They turned the ball over 4 times. It was a bunch of bad turnovers too. Like, outside of that game, they've scored over 30 every week. And actually, they've scored over 40 in every game except for their one against Arizona and Oregon. So yeah, Utah's defense is good. They're not going to allow them to score 40, I don't believe. But I would not be surprised at all if they got to 31, anywhere 35, even 36 potentially, just because they have the talent. But I expect it to be low 30s for Washington. So that's where it's just going to be interesting to see that's what I expect. But can the Utah defense make it more complex than that? Can they force those turnovers and do some things defensively that put Utah's offense in a shorter field, allow them to succeed? Because when it comes, Utah should have some success running the ball. It's going to be one of those things that's in and out. I mean, we mentioned the Huskies giving up 143 on the ground. I think Utah runs for over 150 yards in this game, but the box is going to be packed. So how does that affect Utah? And can Bryson, Devon Bailey, Munir McClain, as I mentioned, those are the 2 guys I'm looking at right now. I think they're going to be able to win at times on the outside. Can Bryson deliver them the ball? That's the question I have. He's capable of doing it, but you can't miss opportunities against a team like the Huskies on the road. So that's where I'm very curious to see what Bryson, the kind of game we're going to be in for from him. But he's played really well this season. He's asked to step into a difficult spot where everyone was talking about college football playoff and when are we getting Cam back? He got benched, all of that, and he's handled it all exceptionally well. And I expect him to continue to perform well. The question is, can he play I mean, what would have to be probably if Utah wants to win this game, Bryson has to play the best game of his career. I don't think that's a hot take unless the Utah defense goes Arizona, like gets somehow they force those 4 turnovers. But even as I mentioned, those 4 turnovers they had against Arizona State were just such fluky ones. Then I'm talking about Washington, those turnovers they had against them. So that's where I'm looking at this one from an offensive standpoint, but some success running the ball. I think the Utah offensive line versus the Washington defensive line is a good matchup back and forth. I give Utah's rushing attack the edge over Washington's offensive line, but I do expect their pass rush right now is a little better than our offensive line is, which makes me nervous. But once again, leave the extra guys in. That's where you can kind of help alleviate that a little bit and give Bryson the time needed to operate and make plays. And Bryson's pocket presence has gotten a little stronger all season. He's gotten better at throwing on the move too, evading pressure, keeping his eyes downfield. That's where he's just gotten more comfortable. Andy Ludwig's opened it up more for him too. But I'm excited to see the game plan that Andy Ludwig has. So hopefully Utah can get that rushing attack going a little bit. There's going to be some second and longs. Can Bryson deliver those balls on time and accurately to those guys if they do create separation? That's something I'm excited to watch and see because Utah's going to have an opportunity to earn a hard-fought road victory in this one. And it might come down to some of the plays Bryson makes because when you're playing a team in the top 5, like I said, it will fall on the quarterback at times. He won't, once again, Bryson won't be the reason they lose the game, won't be the reason they win the game, but if they do, he will play a part in both of those things. The big one, he's the quarterback. So, yeah, we're going to continue to talk about this game, of course. Got some more game previews and prediction stuff. We'll be talking with Locked On Huskies this week. But even before we transition to men's basketball, I do want to talk about the college football rankings that were released last night and Utah's placement in them. We're going to dive into that in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you guys a little more about our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including the spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So you can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. And speaking about Utah's game against Washington, while we're looking at the line this one, it's still Washington 9.5, but I just mentioned Utah offensively. Look, this Huskies defense has allowed plays to be given up. Utah has continued to grow offensively. I expect to see Sione Vaki back in the game plan. Should have mentioned that in the last second. I just think that this is a big game. You need to be at your best. I expect to see Sione Vaki. They did not need him against Arizona State. I think had that game been a little closer, we would have seen some of Sione Vaki on offense. This is a game where his speed and explosiveness is going to really be able to help out Utah. And yes, they'll need him defensively, but they can still survive with Teo Johnson or I guess Teo Johnson's the main guy who kind of swaps in for him. So Jonathan Hall getting some more run, maybe it's a guy like that. There are guys that Utah can put into their secondary that I don't think drop the playoff versus his speed gives the offense an element that they just simply don't have from the running back position without him. Just when you talk about that, I mean, he's the fastest guy on the team. So that's where he looks even faster than Nate Johnson. I know it's close because Nate did have that great run last week. And even if we don't see Sione, we better see some Nate Johnson then because one of those two guys, just for the speed element, has to be incorporated in the Utah offensive game plan. So, but yeah, back to the FanDuel aspect of this. So because of Washington's defensive struggles at times and Utah having success offensively as of recently, I do expect Utah to keep this one within 10. So I do like Utah to cover. We'll continue to talk about why throughout the week, but I would roll with Utah on this one. I think they got this is a Kyle Whittingham team, and betting against Kyle Whittingham does not usually roll well. Mentioned offensively and defensively, there are matchups Utah's going to be capable of exploiting. I think they'll do it enough to keep the game close, regardless of if they're able to emerge victorious. So make sure you guys head over to FanDuel and look at those odds right now. Alrighty, I want to talk about the college football playoff, the rankings that were just released recently. And when you're talking about the CFP, you're talking about a show and a committee that Mark Harlan is on as well. So that's something that's kind of fun. But the official college football rankings came off yesterday, and Utah did not move. They kind of stayed put at 18 versus the AP poll moved Utah all the way up to 13. They moved Utah 5 spots because of all the teams that lost. When you talk about Oklahoma suffering a second straight loss, or also you just teams like, LSU, Notre Dame dropping, but instead the committee opted to have Kansas, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma Oklahoma State and Kansas jump Utah, Oklahoma State put. And look, I do think Utah should have been above. I just don't like the way Oklahoma's trending right now. So I think that Utah deserves to be above Oklahoma. I think Utah should have moved up. I understand a little bit. And this is also where I'd be very curious if does this I don't want to say that actually. I was just going to say something about maybe the committee's looking ahead to like and anticipating Utah losing to Washington. I don't think that's the case. That's this committee, the way they compile everything, the way that the process works. I just don't think they would do that. But I do think Utah should have been higher. I think they, yes, keep Missouri above them. I understand that. But you look at teams like Oregon State, Tennessee, like they're up to 12 and 13. I mean, Oregon State just last week lost to Arizona. And I know the committee is high on Arizona, as they should be, by the way, because Arizona has been playing really good. Arizona jumping in at 21 now, and that's a team that Utah's going to be facing next week. Utah's next. We originally were just talking about how this stretch of USC, Oregon, Washington, and now it's like, oh no, now Arizona's a top 20 team as well, basically. So it's become tougher, but yeah, Louisville, no problem with them remaining above. Obviously, their one loss, and Oregon State owns the head-to-head. They have to be up front there, but I do think Utah should be right behind them, right with a Tennessee. Because if you're looking at this Tennessee team, where's Tennessee's best win? This is where they beat UConn 59-3. What in the world is the difference between what UConn did versus what Utah did? Utah just beat the brakes off a team, and it was a better team than UConn. And even like, yes, you beat Kentucky nearly 33-27. You beat A&M, beat South. Like, where's the good? Utah does not have a bad loss. Their losses are to Oregon State and then to Oregon. Those are both top 12 teams. Tennessee's lost to an unranked Florida team, and Utah beat that Florida team too. And they lost the best game they played to a ranked Alabama team. Yeah, it was 34-20, so they kept it close-ish, but they blew the lead they maintained. You gotta finish games and win if you want to be ranked that high. So I disagree. Now, the nice thing is the rankings, as always, are fluid. They play at Missouri this week. I think Missouri's pretty good. I actually have no problem with Missouri being above Utah because you look who they lose to. Georgia. Like, that's Georgia. I don't have a problem with saying, oh, they lost to Georgia. We don't want to drop them too far. We'll drop them a little bit because they lost, but I don't have a problem with them not falling because that's Georgia versus it's not a loss to, once again, Florida, who I think is solid, but that's a game you should want to win. If it's not as, once again, Utah's better losses. That's what I get back to than Tennessee. So I feel like that's where little SEC bias just in that mark. I think that Utah should have been ranked above Tennessee. And I understand Oklahoma State's hot. Kansas is starting to win some games too. But if we're evaluating the totality of the season too, they have the loss of Texas, so not a bad loss there, but they also lost to Oklahoma State. And I don't see why Kansas gets to jump ahead of Utah when Utah takes care of business too. Like, I think it should be Utah that's right behind that's right behind Oregon State. I honestly think that Utah, I have a good case for Utah. Not Oregon State, excuse me. Utah at 15, I think is where Utah should be. They should have moved up 3 spots. Then it should have gone Oklahoma State, Kansas, Oklahoma. But Oklahoma being above, and I know Oklahoma State's playing good football right now, and their other loss that they suffered was to Kansas, but both those losses were unranked at the time. Utah's losses were to ranked teams at the time and teams that you currently have in the top 12. So that's where I think Utah should be at 15, but a lot of these teams play each other. It'll work itself out. And if Utah is able to get a huge upset against Washington, then they'll be moving up. We don't need to worry about that. Really quick before we get out of here, let's talk about Utah's 101-66 men's basketball win over Eastern Washington. Fun to watch Raleigh Wooster just run the floor and get Utah in positions to succeed as always. And he just stuffed the stat sheet: 15 points, 8 assists, 6 steals, 5 rebounds. Raleigh's a veteran at this point and played like one against a team that Utah should beat and did beat. So excited to see the season Raleigh is going to be in for because could be a good one based on his initial outing here. Also, how about the shooting for Utah? Cole Badgema and Gabe Madsen combining for 7 threes, with Madsen dropping 20, Badgema 17. Shooting is all the rage in college basketball right now. So this is where I think that Utah could have an opportunity to really be effective here. And Utah started Brandon and Lawson Lovering. That's something I'm curious if they'll continue to do because Brandon can shoot a little bit, of course, but the spacing just not as much there. You're willing to secede Brandon Carlson threes if you're a defense. So that'll be an interesting trend to watch for Utah offense, what they continue to do, because that could be a potential spacing issue. Also nice to see Ben Carlson come in and hit a couple threes. Cabo with a double-double. Hit 6 offensive rebounds, 5 defensive, 11 and 11 overall, so 2 blocks. And yeah, those were the good to see Utah just get a lot out of their front court in this one. Even Carlson was only 2 for 7 with 11 points, kind of playing a little out of role as a power forward, but nice to see him go 7 of 8 from the free throw line. So yeah, Utah's better than Eastern. They took care of business, but this is a Utah team that dropped 57 points in the second half. So very impressive stuff as Craig's team get their first win of the season. And speaking of wins, that's what Utah is going to be trying to do against Washington. We're going to continue to be breaking down that game on this week's Locked On Utes. So make sure you guys keep it at Locked On Utes for more Utah football content every single day. We'll see you tomorrow.